One of the joys of homeschooling that everyone talks about is the flexibility, but there really is flexibility. And some of the most fun trips that I've done with the kids is very spontaneous.
Welcome to the show called Let's Talk Homeschool, brought to you by Apologia Educational Ministries. This is the show where we talk about everything homeschooling, the who, what, when, where, why, and how. We want to affirm and encourage you in the decision to homeschool, challenge and inspire you to take it to new heights, and celebrate everything you get to experience along the way in this adventure of a lifetime. I'm your host, Carman, and today I have two guests, Lesh and Doug Powell. And I want to remind our listening audience that you can also watch us on YouTube, or continue listening on your favorite podcast app. Today's show is titled Around the World in 30 Minutes. Okay, Doug and Lad, let's talk homeschool. So it's been said that who we are and who we will be 5 years from now is largely influenced by the people we meet, the books we read or the media we consume, and the places we travel and visit. And that is the topic of our conversation today. Through the course of years, individually in our personal lives and as part of our business, we've had the opportunity to travel to some pretty amazing places for many different reasons, some homeschool related, some personal related. And we're going to talk about our top 2 or 3 locations, world cultural centers that each of us have had a chance to visit and how they've shaped our lives. And we're going to try and do this in our normal 25 to 30 minutes, so hang on for a ride. It's going to be a fast one. So welcome, Lad and Doug. Lad, why don't you go first and introduce yourself, and then Doug, you can introduce yourself and tell about your role at Apologia, and then we will get into these world cultural centers that have shaped our lives.
Good to be with you, Davis. I'm Lad Lesh. I'm General Manager of Apologia, father of 9 wonderful kids, husband to April, and we live on a small farm, growing bigger by the day, out in the Carolinas.
Doug, how about yourself?
I'm Doug Powell. I'm the creative director, art director at Apologia, and I do not have 9 kids, but one of the places I have been has been to Lad's house and to Davis's house. I've been to both your houses, so neither one of you have come to my house.
We need to do that. I've been to Nashville, so we need to make a point of that on the next visit.
Absolutely.
Because I'm sure it'll shape our lives in wonderful ways, because we've each been that iron sharpening each other. We've been able to have the enjoyable satisfaction of doing life and ministry together.
It won't be to see you, Doug. It'll be to see your amazing office.
Yes.
That's what an incredible office you have.
You're welcome to come if you can fit.
Well, 2020 made it difficult to travel internationally. Through the years, for Rachel and I in particular, we've had a chance to go to several places around the world to help as an Apologia team putting together a homeschool conference. And one that I want to share with you this morning was in 2013. We had a chance to go to Kenya, specifically to Nairobi. And of course, we took in all the sites and did the animal kingdom viewings, and went on safari and all that. But we got to help the locals put on a homeschool conference. And of course, in Nairobi, it's an English-speaking country, but we were in this little Christian camp. And one of the things that I do remember from that, besides the fact that these folks were so grateful that we put on a pretty nice conference by their standards. By American standards, it was a very small one, but they were so grateful because their homeschool movement was really pretty fledgling, and they needed some support. They were all excited, and we brought a team of about 15 or 16 people to do a full-fledged homeschool conference with a children's program, a youth program, an adult program. We had a table with Apologia books on it, and they were just thrilled. But there's always those cultural moments that are so different when you visit somewhere new. And so, one, we got to learn Swahili, and I love the language and the vocabulary of Swahili. Jambo, greeting each other, and they would sing some songs in Swahili that were just beautiful. I remember recording several of the dances and the songs that they were singing. But every day in this place that was colonized by Britain, they have a break for tea time. And they had the steamed milk and the hot tea, and that's what we did. And as an American, I'm rushing around, and after 20 minutes, I've had a nice break, and they just kept prolonging it for a nice hour and longer. So that was one big difference culturally. And then, of course, the other was the local animals. So on this Christian camp, there were the monkeys, and I would liken them to squirrels in the U.S. They were everywhere. They were coming after the food, and there were metal bars on the windows primarily to keep the monkeys out. And then, of course, we slept under tents inside these cinder block buildings, and that was to keep the mosquitoes out. So those are some of the quick takeaways from my time in Kenya. And I got one or two other places I'll share with you as we continue this program. But Lad, why don't you go next? What's one location you want to start with and share with the folks about how it shaped your life a little bit, the cultural differences, and just what we learn when we visit other places?
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes to mind is, as believers in Christ, that when we travel, whether it's for business or on a mission trip or for pleasure, when you're down at the resort in the Caribbean, we're Christians first and foremost. We don't shed Christ when we walk out the door, or we don't put on Christ just for a mission trip, but we are Christians who are to be salt and light no matter where we go. And travel is just one of those unique blessings that we have in our time. I pinch myself every time I go to the airport and I see this portal to the entire world. You can get on an airplane and go anywhere in the world. What an incredible blessing. Some who travel a lot probably think it's more of a curse, but it's really remarkable. So going and traveling to me never gets old. It's always a privilege, a blessing, and I don't take it for granted. And it's also an opportunity as Christians, again, no matter why you're traveling, to interact with folks that you'd never interact with on a regular basis. And so it's remarkable to be in prayer about the trip and say, Lord, whatever you have, bring the right folks in contact and help me to be a godly witness for you. And also, to be learning and also aware of the different cultures, the different experiences you're having, and really grateful for those. One of the unique moments I've had in the past year on a recent business trip was we got to stop over in Beijing, China, and we had the privilege of traveling together, gentlemen, and I was with my son, and we were able to experience Beijing and the Chinese culture and, of course, the Chinese system. And frankly, it was pretty eye-opening. The level of censorship, the state control, everything we've read, but then to actually experience it was quite different. And to be able to show my son this system of governance. And even there, though, the Lord brought an opportunity where I was able in a hotel lobby to share Christ, to share the gospel. So even in a communist system where the worship of the state is on display, it was such an opportunity and blessing to be able to share Christ in that particular setting. And to be able to share that with Jackson was a really amazing experience.
All right, Doug, your turn.
Well, I'm going to shift what I was going to talk about because earlier on that trip with you guys, we had a layover in Istanbul, Turkey, which is on my list of most fascinating places I've ever visited, both for its rich Christian history And well, that's the main attraction. There's archaeological features. There's so much of it that's still there. Old Constantinople, and its place in Christian tradition right now as the seat of Eastern Orthodoxy, which I am not Eastern Orthodox, but through the things that I write, I have become very interested in. But one of the things that ties into what Ladd said is that the opportunity to share Christ in unexpected ways. Actually, I saw it play out with Ladd because we went into the Grand Bazaar, the largest shopping mall in the world, and I think the oldest. There's 4,000 shops, and it's like miles. It's crazy Indiana Jones kind of bizarre type of thing. And I believe out of the 4,000, Ladd went into one shop of all of them, looking for Turkish Delight. And as he was sampling the different, I mean, there's like dozens of kinds of Turkish Delight, and it's all fresh and it's all amazing. And Ladd stayed in there and ended up in a conversation with the guy running the shop and shared the
Well,
gospel.
first I was told not to come home unless I brought Turkish Delight. So there's that.
Yeah. Well, you know, I actually brought home Turkish Delight the last time, and my family didn't want it, which is great because I love Turkish Delight. So, so as I was running around looking at as many of the 4,000 shops as possible, Ladd was in here having this conversation with this guy. Regarding Istanbul, it was kind of a mulligan for me because this is my second layover there. The first time, of course, the number one thing on my list was going to see Hagia Sophia. It's such an incredibly important church in the history of Christianity. And so I was finally going to be able to go to it. And Ladd and I get up early and we go up to go in, and it was closed. It was closed on Mondays because it was a museum. So that was right before COVID. During COVID, it got converted back into a mosque. It was it was built as a church in the 6th century. It was the largest building in the world for 1,000 years. It's still incredibly impressive. And so I was so amped up about going in and finally experiencing Hagia Sophia, and it was closed on Mondays. But during COVID, it got converted back to a mosque, which means it's open 24 hours, although if you're not Muslim, there are restricted hours. So we finally got to go in a couple months ago, and it was just as awesome, truly awesome. I rarely use that word. It was awesome being inside there. It's hard to convey the scale of it. The floor of it alone can hold 2 Parthenons, and it is from the floor to the top of the dome can accommodate the Statue of Liberty. So you just don't get a sense of that when you're looking at the pictures. And it's you can't study really early Christian history without running into the Hagia Sophia over and over and over and over again.
It is interesting just to think about the diversity of the world cultural cities that we're going to be talking about today. So you've heard some from the homeschool slant, from the Christian slant and the differences there. And then as Doug was just mentioning, the world history and the Christian history and traditions that have formed us through the last thousands of years. And as you're saying, Istanbul, formerly Constantinople, is a very important city in world history. So as I go to my second location that I want to mention, it's going to be a little bit of a switch back to the Western locations, and that's the Philippines. So Rachel and I have been to the Philippines a couple of times, both for homeschool conferences. And there's a couple of things that I want to point out that we observed as we were there. So the folks that invited us are your typical Westerners. I mean, there's a lot of Western cultural influence in the Philippines specifically. And so it's very westernized. English is the primary language, and then they have like an island language that the locals use pretty infrequently. But there's this vehicle on the island that jumps out pretty immediately when you get there, and it's called the jeepneys. And they're basically Jeeps, as we know them, that are all decked out and converted into these fancy-looking taxis with all kinds of personality traits, put on each one. Some are, just colorful. Some are, all kinds of graffiti on them. Some have all kinds of just emblems and gems and sprinkles on them. It's pretty outlandish, some of the designs, but you can't miss the jeepneys. And we got to ride in one of those when we were there. But then we were with a Western family, and we got to go to their home. And in the Philippines, the separation of the haves and the have-nots is a much bigger divide than in the U.S. I mean, the railroad tracks are completely different on one side or the other. It's not just, haves and have-nots or poor versus rich. It's destitute and practically homeless living in a shanty versus what we would consider very upscale in the U.S. Because this family we were with was very typical of that side of the tracks, and they had a chauffeur, they had 2 or 3 maids in the house, and that was just normal for how they were living. But then they had this homeschool store with books for sale and where they did co-ops and all kinds of activities like that. But literally across the street, you could see the metal shacks, the cardboard buildings, and where people were pulling from the electrical lines to get a little bit of electricity for the day. And that side, which represents 30% of the population, is so poor, they're not in public school, they're not homeschooling, they're literally living a completely different lifestyle. Right there in the middle of Manila with an airport, skyscrapers, and people that have chauffeurs and maids in the house. So very different world, nobody in the middle, no middle class whatsoever. Children selling sandwiches on the interstate, just really black and white, night and day. But Rachel and I made this one little trip while we were there, and this is a story I love to tell. Before we left, we told a few folks that we were going to the Philippines. And we have some local friends here in Charlotte who had adopted a young girl. She was about 12 years old at the time, and she was adopted from an orphanage in the Philippines. And so they were very curious to talk to us, and this 12-year-old girl said, "Hey, I have a best friend who is still in the orphanage. Here's her name, here's her address, and here's a gift I'd love y'all to get to her. If there's any way possible, you can get to this little orphanage." So we didn't think the odds were very high, but we took it and we said we'd give it our best shot. So Rachel and I decided one afternoon on our own to do the following. We knew we wouldn't have Wi-Fi when we left the hotel. So I took a map, a picture on my phone of the map before I left the hotel and used that as my guide. And then we started walking. We walked along parallel to the interstate. Then we got into this downtown slum area. Then we got into the really poor section of the slum area where there's chickens and stray dogs and metal buildings all over the place and people walking everywhere. And we weren't nervous personally, but we could tell we were in a different part of town. And we made it to the road that we thought might be the road. And we turned left. We were at the one end. We turned left and just started walking. We looked left and right. There's no real house numbers on anything. And we just looked for any kind of sign of children, of maybe a sign that said orphanage. And we got almost to the end of this road, and we saw some children walking around. We said, "Hey, do you know where such and such orphanage is?" And they said, "Yes, it's 2 houses down." So we went there, and the kids were starting to come and go, and we talked to this one person and said, do you know the name of I forget the name of the director that they had given us, but we asked for her name and said, "Yeah, she's right here." So they brought this adult to us, and then we asked, "Does a little girl named such and such live here?" They said, "Yes." And we said, "We have a gift for her from her best friend," and we gave the name of the person in the U.S., and they said, "Are you kidding me?" And we ended up taking pictures, giving this gift to this girl, telling the story when we got back. But the big news was we told our local Filipino hosts this story, and they were mortified because it would be like us going to, the bad part of New York City in the 70s. They said, "What were you thinking? You should have never done that." But we made it back safe. We're here to tell the story, and God did some amazing things during that time, literally getting to see the other side of the tracks in the Philippines while we were helping with some of the homeschool work on the other side. All right, lad, we got to hear another location from you.
So one of the joys of homeschooling that everyone talks about is the flexibility, but there really is flexibility. And some of the most fun trips that I've done with the kids is very spontaneous. Most of my life is very planned around planning meetings and schedules and hourly, hours set with very little flexibility. So a little spontaneity is good for the soul. So I'll grab a few of the kids because you have to divide and conquer when you have a large family. And we'll go on a road trip or grab a ticket somewhere. To give you an example, Oakley, my daughter, I took her up into a snowstorm in Vermont named Oakley. I was just happening to go by. None of the locals even knew the storm was named Oakley. They're like, it's just a snowstorm. But for us, that was a neat experience. Hiking into Canada in the snowstorm Oakley. I mean, all spontaneous. No hotels planned. Everything's just grab and go. Took my boys on a spontaneous trip to the Dakotas, and again, doing it very inexpensively. National parks, state parks, and just where the road leads. So those are sweet memories with the kids that I've really enjoyed. And, of course, homeschooling gives you that flexibility to go last minute to places.
All right, Doug, give us another major world cultural center, because I know you've had a chance to visit some interesting places.
Major World Cultural Center. Well, this will count as that for some, maybe not all, but about a week ago, I got back from visiting Mount Athos, Greece. And if you pull your map out of Greece, you'll see in the northeast part of Greece, kind of southeast of Thessaloniki, there is a 3 peninsulas that stick out from there. And the easternmost one is called Mount Athos. And I had been doing some research for a couple of years into Mount Athos for a novel that I've been working on. And I ended up getting to know an Eastern Orthodox priest in Birmingham, Alabama. It's not far from where I live in Nashville, and he had been there. So I was like pressing him for information all the time, or quite a bit, about Athos, because Athos is basically closed off to the entire world. There's a wall that literally goes across it that cuts it off from the mainland, and it extends for about 40 miles out into the ocean there. And there is nothing on the peninsula except 20 Orthodox monasteries, and it is governed autonomously. It's technically a part of Greece, but it has its own charter and governs itself. It's under really the purview of the ecumenical patriarch in Constantinople. So what it is almost like, I grew up in Oklahoma where you had Indian reservations and stuff. So Mount Athos is like a Byzantine reservation. Once you the only thing on Athos are monks, and there's 20 different monasteries. About half the monks live in the monasteries. The rest live in different cells and groups of cells called skeets. And you can't visit there unless you're Orthodox. You have to get a special permission to go visit the monasteries there, and they allow 110 or 120 Orthodox men a day and 10 non-Orthodox men a day, and you're only allowed to be there for 3 nights, and then you got to go. So it's completely exclusive. And so my friend said he occasionally guides pilgrims there, and that's what they are. You don't go there for vacation. You don't go there to visit. You go there as a pilgrim. And he knew that I was interested because I was writing a book, but he also knew that I was interested in just learning more about Orthodoxy. And so he sent me an email and said he was going to head over there in May, and that he opened it up to me. And I was able to go. I accidentally got listed as a catechumen, which is in between. So this is like somebody who's interested in Orthodoxy but has not been received into the church yet. So I kind of snuck in under the radar there, but I ended up spending 2 different nights in monasteries and 2 at 2 different monks' cells. And if you've ever seen or read The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco, this is what inspired the book. Because one of the fascinating things about Athos is the libraries are full of the ancient manuscripts. And there's all sorts of treasures in these places, and they have no worldly value to the monks, but they are an important part of the unbroken chain of tradition that they are preserving. That's their value to them, but they don't have any worldly value. And we don't even know all the treasures they have. They have about 1/3 of all Greek manuscripts that exist are on Athos. All the most important Byzantine New Testament manuscripts are on Athos, which is why I was interested in it. But even the culture is fascinating, because once you land on Athos, you don't drive from the mainland to the peninsula. You have to get on a ferry and get taken down halfway down the peninsula to even get on there after you get this special ecclesiastical permit. And then once you step foot on shore, you're on the Julian calendar. So it's 13 days in the past, and midnight is reckoned at sundown. So your watch is immediately 3 to 6 hours off and 13 days off on the calendar. And you're just on Byzantine church time at that point. You're completely within that schedule. So that meant like getting up with the monks at either 4 or 5 in the morning and starting the day immediately with 3.5-hour services that you stand all the way through and are done in Greek. So, I took a couple of semesters of biblical Greek, but I cannot follow along with the service like that. And every single syllable of those 3.5 hours worth of services is read out. It's either sung, it had liturgical singing, or it's being read, but there's no spontaneity whatsoever. It's really hard to recognize what's going on a lot of the times. It was absolutely a fascinating experience.
I have to say that would be influential in one's life, to get to experience all those changes, the calendar, the clock, the language, the liturgy, the ritual. That is just absolutely fascinating right there.
The way you travel from one monastery to another is primarily through on mule paths. There are some roads. There are a couple of rare paved roads, but otherwise they're just kind of dirt roads, or mainly mule paths. And sometimes the path is just so steep or so dangerous along the cliffs, you get on a mule and that's how you cross it. And I'm not like a big horse rider guy, so having to do the mule thing was, and with the mules, you have to sit side saddle. Anyway, so you're going along cliffs on side saddle, and it's just, for a city guy like me, it was wildly outside my experience. So in every single way, there's like no reference point. So
Mount Athos.
yeah,
Place to go, folks.
even the way you eat there. I mean, you're a guest of the monasteries, so you come out of the service of Vespers. You walk immediately into the refectory, where you sit down and you have 10 minutes to eat your meal in silence while they read scripture or readings from the early church fathers, and then you walk immediately back into the church and have another service for Compline. I mean, it's so relentlessly devoted to a life of prayer that even without being able to understand the text of the liturgy, it's pretty profound to see the devotion of the monks.
And it's by invitation only.
Yeah, by permission only. Yeah. So.
Well, I want to actually give our audience a chance to hear one more location from each of us, but we're going to have to keep it to a short 2 or 3 minutes each. But let's get 3 more major world cultural centers on our list here as we go around the world quickly. So the one that I'll add is in 2018, Rachel and I got to go to a homeschool conference in Russia. The first one was in Moscow, then we went to St. Petersburg, and then we even went to a place called Viborg, which is right across from Finland. You could see Finland in the horizon. So this was 2018, pre-COVID. Russia was fairly open. There was even some sense of optimism when we were there that, hey, Russia might be on the road to, a more capitalistic, non-communist kind of lifestyle. And the 2 things that really jumped out at me was how stoic the people of Russia are. We were sitting on buses, we were on a train, we were in a restaurant, and as Americans, we tended to smile at some people, and you could tell that was a no-no. The people in Russia were not interested in smiling back, and there was even a sense of, what is going on with these people that are smiling at us? So that was the people in general. But the folks that were at the homeschool conference, it was a completely different sense of optimism and joy and excitement because of the movement and the momentum that they were experiencing in homeschooling. And when I did this one presentation for the men, and I'm not your most charismatic person, but I was giving it my all. But by American standards, I'm kind of a meat and potatoes kind of guy. I'm not this extra special sauce in my presentations. And then after I presented my workshop, one of the Russian MCs got up and he said, he was serious as day when he said this. He said, "Our next speaker is from Russia, and he does not have quite the enthusiasm as Mr. Carman, but here's Vladimir so-and-so." And it was just an interesting take on, they thought I was probably a little over the top. But by American standards, I was nowhere close to an over-the-top charismatic presenter. So that was quite fascinating in its own right. And of course, we were there in May, and so it was the white nights where we're way up in the northern latitudes, and it was the sun was up till 11 p.m. and it was back up at 2:30 or 3 in the morning. So just a completely different experience there at that time of year, when the sun was up for a very long time. So that's my quick take on our time in Russia. Lad, what's one more location on your list?
Davis, I'll say it's so great to hear about homeschooling taking off globally. And one of these days, we need to talk about the global homeschool movement, if you haven't done so on your show before, how it's taking off in places like Russia, South Korea, Brazil, the Philippines. I mean, it's just amazing to see and talk to international homeschoolers, a lot who have used Apologia. Of course, we have a number of missionaries that have used Apologia throughout the world, and they contact us often, and it's just it's awesome to hear that it's being used worldwide. One of the places where Christianity has really increased greatly, and also just an interest in homeschooling in general, is South Korea. And so when we were in South Korea, I've been privileged to go several times in Seoul. One of those experiences was going up to the DMZ line with my brother who was serving in the military while he flying actually A-10s over in Korea. So a pretty exhilarating assignment, and to be able to experience that with him, and to realize that level of danger so close to a major metropolitan city. A lot of folks in Seoul never go just a few miles north to experience the danger right on their doorstep. And of course, America's been there a long time providing defense. So to be over there with my brother and experience that together was a pretty remarkable experience. Traveling on mopeds in the Korean countryside, also a big plus.
For me, let's see, my last one would be Israel in general, but Jerusalem in particular. To be able to go on to the Temple Mount and see the archaeological park at the base of it it's just hard to put into words how meaningful it is, how impactful it is. And also to visit the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and explore everything that's in there is also pretty profound. I would include in that Bethlehem, which is a suburb, and going into the cave of the Nativity there as well. Just knowing why those sites are what they are, how they were identified, the history behind them, and the almost certainty to their authenticity, about as certain as you could ever know anything in the ancient world. It just puts the smell and the dirt back on the story. It adds an element of historicity to stories that we hear so much. They start to become a little bit abstract and unreal to us.
I'm so glad you mentioned the Holy Land because in 2020, Rachel and I had our first trip scheduled for March of 2020, and we all know what happened then. So our trip got postponed to November of 2020 and got canceled again. So we just kind of put it off and didn't worry about when we'd get back again. Well, September of this last year, we've actually registered for our first trip to the Holy Land, hoping to finally get there. And then less than a month later, October 7th happened. And the trip that we were supposed to do last month in May of 2024 obviously got postponed to May of 25. So Lord willing, we'll finally get our chance to smell the smells, stand in the dirt, walk the paths of all those wonderful historical places where Christ walked and lived, where Christianity was born and took root, and where so much of world stories are happening even right now as we talk. So glad that was on our list.
There's lots of cats there. That's the big surprise. And on Athos. But they haven't, there's cats on the Temple Mount. That was the big shocker for me because they keep the rat population down, is what I was told.
Well, folks, it's always hard to bring these conversations to a close, but it's time to do so. So thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. We hope you'll join us again next time. This has been Let's Talk Homeschool, brought to you by Apologia Educational Ministries. I've been your host, Davis Carman, with our guests, Lesh and Doug Powell. Have a great day, and until next time, we are walking by faith and enjoying the homeschooling adventure of a lifetime.